Before we get started in this episode, a quick announcement. As you know, I'm very passionate about acceptance and commitment therapy, and I also run a busy practice in Canberra. We're currently looking for psychologists who are registered in Australia to join our team, who are also passionate about learning about ACT. We provide supervision on a group and individual basis and training around ACT. So if this is you, if you're interested, please express your interest at strategicpsychology.com.au/careers. Look forward to hearing from you. And now back to this episode.
Okay, life can be crazy. You're feeling like you're sinking, just trying to find a meaning. It's time for better thinking. Yeah, better thinking. Time to tune in. Let's go.
Welcome back to Better Thinking. My name is Nesh Nikolic, and today's guest is Scott Harris, and he talks to us about his journey through traumatic brain injury sustained in a serious motor vehicle accident and how he's recovered over the years and its effect on his life. A truly inspirational and fascinating story, and something that I wanted to share with others, as it's not really understood how TBI can go out and affect people, particularly with regards to their memory and amnesia and how they piece their life back together. Hope you enjoy this episode. Scott, big appreciation for coming onto the show. I've been really looking forward to talking to you and hearing about your story. Truly inspirational, and for me as a psychologist, really want to find out about your mindset and how you've approached each one of these stages of your life. And I know this is probably not making much sense to our listeners right now, but looking to unfold all of that. So welcome to the show.
Yeah, thanks, Nesh. Thanks for having me here.
Scott, let's just delve straight into it. I'm really intrigued about how your journey, how your life has unfolded. I know that's without sort of telling too much of the story, because I want to hear it from you. I'm intrigued, if you don't mind today, that we spend a bit of time in your mindset, talking about what it was like at each of these stages, and how you've pivoted and made changes, and even your current challenges, at the moment as well. So firstly, I want to just thank you for your vulnerability today and being open to coming onto the show, because I know that it's not easy to do so, but it's very valuable for myself and also for all the listeners.
Yeah, thanks. I'm an open book, so no questions are off limits.
Maybe we just start at the very, very beginning. Tell me a little bit about who's Scott Harris, and more importantly, as a kid. Let's go all the way back there and weave our way in, so can find out who Scott Harris was back then. And obviously we're all changed, from being a kid to an adult, but maybe we can start there if you don't mind.
Yeah, sure. Definitely we all change as we get older. And I guess that's a bit kind of a bit of the hard part when people talk to me about what were you like prior to your accident and how's the accident changed you. I don't know if it's the accident itself that's changed me, like as in my personality, or it's actually the fact that I'm just older and more wiser. So if you're going to go back prior to 2008, in what I say my old life, prior to 2008, I was 23 years of age. I was an electrician. So I was going through my apprenticeship. I was about, I think, 2.5 years, around about 2.5 years through my my electrical apprenticeship. And then on the 15th of November 2008, when I was 23 years old, I came face to face with an event that was about to change my life. It was about to, I was walking down a path, and in a split second, I was on another path. I was on
Scott,
another path, and
if you don't mind, let me just jump in. Tell me about Scott as a 21-year-old. Who was that kid? How would have your friends have described you back then, or how would have you described yourself back then?
All right. I guess I was a typical 21-year-old. I loved going out with my mates. I'd say I loved partying. I loved just being with my mates. And I didn't really take life that seriously. I'd been through further education. I'd done an advanced diploma in digital graphics, and then after that, I finished that. Didn't move on. Didn't go ahead with that, and then kind of found myself just enjoying life. And then I started an apprenticeship that was working with my brother and his the mob that he was working with, and then that was the next stage. It was starting the apprenticeship, and prior to that, I mean, I went through high school, finished high school, and did my further education.
And were you when you say typical, is it kind of like a bit lost, not showing? It's a big wide world. There's many opportunities. It's like, what do you want to do for the rest of your life? It's like, my God, how do you even answer that? That's a daunting question. Let's do 100%. Some digital graphics. I think you see graphic design or something like that.
Digital media. So my big dream was to work for Pixar.
That was ambitious. Yeah.
Look, yeah, exactly. Yeah. But look, I was ambitious, but the deflating element to it was being told by numerous people that it's very hard to get into that into that industry, and B, that they have thousands of applicants go through there, and once in a blue moon they'll hire someone. And that just really disempowered me to keep going on with it. And look, who were the
people who said that to a 21-year-old? Who were they? If you're allowed to name them.
Oh, no, not going to say any names. Right. No, look, they're often the closest people to us that have our best interests at heart. But yeah, look, it's
they're trying to set our expectations to ground us, when we're going a bit flighty.
Exactly. And that's a big part of one of my injuries, my brain injury, is that I do have very, very big, grand ideas that may never come to fruition, and that's just something that I think of. It's either the brain injury or it's the ambitiousness that I've adopted from my accident.
So tell us a little bit more about, you're 23 going down one path and what happened?
Okay, so I was 23 and I was walking down the path, not metaphorically, walking down the path of life, and then in an instant I was on this other path, but I didn't realize I was on that other path just yet. That actually took a number of years. But how I changed my direction in life was that I was involved in a motorbike accident. And the accident,
what were you doing?
I was motorbike riding. It was a dirt bike accident, and I had a head on with one of my good mates. We were riding out the back of a mate's property here in Victoria, and we didn't see each other coming. There were mistakes made. There were mistakes made, but can't do anything about it now.
Was it like a crest or something, or was it a turn?
No, it was. I was going up the hill and he was coming down the hill, and it was around a corner that was couldn't exactly see what was coming. And even if you could see what was coming, we were going that fast that it was very hard to avoid. And we had a head on. And when I say head on, I mean smack bang in the middle. And I've got a picture of it, of my bike after the event, and that you can see his wheel in my wheel. So you can see the imprint of where our wheels connected. And I went over the handlebars and I smashed my face on his motorbike, and that instantly knocked me out. Instantly, like that was kind of was my saving grace, that it knocked me out straight away, because I laid there unconscious for about 20 minutes until the air ambulance arrived. The air ambulance arrived and they induced me straight
in 20 minutes.
Yes, they did, and that was actually, that was such a lucky event that happened. We have in Melbourne, in Victoria, we have two air ambulance that cover the distance of about sort of think is about Switzerland. And if one of them wasn't available, if they both weren't available to take both myself and my friend off to the hospital, then I'm not sure if we'd still be here. And they were flying to another job and close enough to us that they could be called to divert their attention to us. And that was just amazing, because if they had have gone to their job, picked up the patients, taken to the hospital, and disembarked them, then flown out to us, that would, I'm not sure if we could have been here to have this conversation.
That's incredible.
So it is very, very, very lucky.
So by chance, there's something else has happened for some other stranger. They're on to a new job. The phone call comes through from, I'm assuming, one of your friends at the time, or however that's kind of happened. They're like, we're in the vicinity, that we're 20 minutes away, or probably less, 15 or 10 minutes away by the time all that occurred, and they were able to come down and attend to both you and your friend.
Yeah, 100%. Well, what actually happened was because it was right down the back of the property that I was riding on, and we were 30 acres, so it wasn't just next door. 30 acres, and one of my mates rode back to the house, called the ambulance, and then a road ambulance arrived, and then they realized they couldn't get down there. They couldn't get down the back because it was out in the bush. So then they called. One of them jumped in my car, which was a Nissan Navara at the time, and drove my car down to the scene. And they got there. Might have been that. Look, I wasn't there. I was there, but I wasn't there, obviously, mentally, consciously. Sorry. And so they may have been, when they got there, they induced me into a coma, and then they called for the air ambulance. I'm not exactly sure how that all played out. But
what do you remember? Do you remember? I mean, did that normal strange thing of everything going slow-mo before you actually crashed? Did that all happen, or that whole memory got wiped out? Like what do you remember?
So I suffered retrograde amnesia, meaning retrograde before an event, and amnesia meaning memory loss. So retrograde amnesia was about 2 weeks. So I lost about 2 weeks of my memory.
My God.
Yeah. So what happened was I was at the spring carnival here in Melbourne. It's a horse racing carnival, and the first day was Derby Day, and I was with my mates, and we were got to about lunchtime. I was probably I was very drunk and couldn't really remember much after that. But then it felt like really honestly felt like somebody clicked their fingers, and I woke up and I was in a hospital bed, and it was then like about a month later.
Wow.
Yeah, and it
Because
was
you were in a
it's
coma
just
for 2 weeks as well. So like
it's
you lost 2 weeks before. So
and then
you went to the horse race to have fun with your friends, and then you woke up a month later effectively. Like
effectively, exactly. Yep, and
wow.
it's such a surreal feeling. And when people have said to me in the past, did you see anything when you were in a coma? Did you see the light? Were you hovering above your bed and you saw everybody looking at you and did not see a thing? It was literally like very, very hard to someone like yourself or someone like your audience to understand the feeling. But if you can imagine slowly blinking your eyes, and when you start your blink, you're in where you are right now, and then when you finish your blink, you are in a completely different world, and it's a month later. And that is exactly what it felt.
Did it feel like there was the lapsing of time, or exactly what you're describing? It was kind of like you're at the Derby and then you woke up, you're in like there was no lapse of time. Did it, because how like when you go to bed, you kind of feel like some time has passed.
Yep.
There was no lapse for you?
Absolutely nothing. Not like it was not even a second. And it's funny you say when you go to bed. Now because of my brain injury, I don't dream, and it does honestly still feel like I blink and I'm awake again, which is that as well is a surreal feeling.
That is, I don't know. I don't even know how to describe it. It's just, well, that's bizarre. Like I don't even know how to put myself in your shoes to feel like
very hard.
No lapsing of time. How weird would that feel? A strange, odd.
Yeah, and it's even when I woke up. So I woke up about 18 days after. Pardon me, 18 days after the event. So I was in the coma for 18 days.
Did they wake you? Did the medical people wake you?
Yeah. So they woke me on and off through my comatose period, and and every time they'd wake me, they'd do tests and then they'd put me back under. And the reason I stayed under for such a period of time is because my brain was swelling, so it'd swell up. And then it would, and then it would swell down, and then it'd swell up, and then it'd go back to normal. And they had to wait until it stabilized, and and that took them 2.5 weeks. And I talk about that in my book that I launched in 2018. I have put in the first few chapters my father's emails that he wrote, because he wrote an email to a group of people, people that wanted to be on his email list, because when I couldn't have visitors, especially not the 30-40 people that were on his list. So he wrote an email every day after he came to the hospital, and that was how I actually got a lot of the information that I tell people was from those emails, which is a really good, just a good thing to help, I guess, teach people, is that when something like this does happen, when any event like this happens, document it, because once it's over, it's not happening again. And the only thing we can rely on is our memory. And with our memory, we misimagine things all the time. And
that means something very different to you, though, doesn't it? And like when you say the only thing we have is our memory, you're saying that differently than when I say that, right?
Yes, I do have my I have a memory problem. Mine is my problem. My long term is okay. It's actually quite good. It is my short term from the frontal lobe damage that I had in the accident. That is the memory that is really hard to engage, and really hard to remember things. The day-to-day working memory.
It's a lot of us take that for granted, right? Because we don't know what it's like to have a change in our memory like that, or to lose it. And you're talking about documenting, that without those emails, you have no memory of that. That was kind of like your surrogate memory at the time.
100%.
Wow.
100%. And
precious.
I guess it is very, very precious. And I don't, it wasn't done. It wasn't done deliberately. He didn't deliberately write the email addresses so that I could later on go over them and understand what happened, and later on down the track write a book about it. He wrote those emails purely for the fact of getting information out to people that couldn't get it. And we had people around the world that wanted to know what was going on with Scott. I had mates in Mexico and England, and that that wanted to be on board and wanted to know exactly what was going on every day. I had an uncle that was in the Philippines, and other people around Australia that wanted to know. So it's very, I'm really grateful that that Dad was able to do that.
So when you wake up, what is it like for you? Are you kind of, do you feel confused? Do you feel like you've been concussed? Is it all weird? Or are you kind of back to being fairly cognizant now of what's going on once you're told where you are? Like, try and explain a little bit about what do you wake up to, and where's your headspace at, because you've had a major brain injury at this point, right? I mean, this is massive.
Do you mean every day, or when I woke up back in 2008?
Yeah, when you woke up 18 days later.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I woke up, and there are things that I remember from waking up, and that the first thing that I remember was when I couldn't talk, was my brother's partner at the time feeding me a spoonful of whatever it was that was getting fed to me, hand feeding me like I was a piece of cattle. Okay, like I was an animal, and that was the word I was looking for. So that was kind of my first thing that I imagined. That was the first thing that I remember. But it's not like when you wake up in the morning, and it's not like you go about your day and you remember every single thing that happens in your day. But I woken up after a major head injury, and a brain injury is like it's like your computer rebooting. So when you open up your computer, if you've shut your computer down, and you open it up, and let's go back to the 90s when you open up, when you start your computer and it goes through all of its configuration and finally starts up an hour later. That's kind of what the brain's like when it's been injured. So I didn't instantly wake up and everything was okay, and I still spoke like this. This voice took me months to be able to articulate anything, and took me years to be able to articulate. We're talking, over 5, 6, 7 years to be able to articulate my words like I do now. Because it's all sort of, that's just things that have gradually gotten better over time. So it's like a computer booting back up, and when the computer's booting up, that's a stage in my recovery. It's called post-traumatic amnesia, and every single brain injury will go through post-traumatic amnesia. Post-traumatic being after a traumatic event, amnesia being the memory loss. So it's essentially the memory that you lost after the event, and in that time when your computer's booting back up, you're not sitting there smashing all the buttons. You're simply waiting for it to re-engage and waiting for it to load up. That is exactly what you got to do with the brain. I was in a room in the rehab hospital. So I was in post-traumatic amnesia for about 40 days. And in that time, you are in a very, very low stimulus environment with no TV, no friends. The only visitors I had were my close family, and I was sleeping about 22 hours a day. So that was giving my brain that chance to boot back up and re-engage.
Sleeping because they were giving you drugs to sleep, or sleeping because you were just exhausted and you were just completely spent all the time. Your brain's just working overtime just to load up.
Yeah, 100%. It was they weren't keeping me asleep. They were. That was my brain trying to boot back up. It's like I'm recently a new father. My daughter was born.
Congratulations.
Thanks. My daughter was born she was born 6 weeks premature about 2 months ago, and it is amazing to see the resemblance between a premature newborn, and my recovery, especially in those early days, because she probably sleeps a lot more than I did, but she sleeps a lot. Like, she's awake not that much, and that's because a baby's brain needs to sleep. And that was exactly the same as an injured brain. It needed rest, because when you rest, that's when your brain is doing all its work, that's all the behind the scenes work. And then when you wake up, that's the show, the front of house show that you see.
So really the first 40 days, which really we're now at basically 60 days after your accident.
Yeah, it was about 2 months.
Is all just small little fragments of when you are awake, and there's only sort of small snippets of each of those times that you're awake.
That's it.
Very fractured, very, very fractured memories.
Yeah, it was about 2 months of my life that I don't exactly remember that well. And I've got a lot of videos, a number of videos from that time when I was in PTA, and I remember because of the videos that I've seen. So I kind of painted my own picture of what that was like. Back then.
It's almost like you've got a memory of looking at the video of what life was like, and so you fill the gaps in around that to create your own memory of what it must have been like. It's kind of so complicated, isn't it?
Yeah, and that's the brain is complicated.
Yeah,
but yeah, it is. It's extremely complex. It's just a very, very complex thing for somebody to navigate. And then when you've got an injured brain, it's even harder to navigate that. Yeah.
So when do you start coming out of that? You mentioned that, one of your first memories is being fed. So I'm assuming, obviously, at that time you just don't have the capacity or the coordination or the energy that But clearly, interestingly, it probably says you had the capacity to mildly chew. I imagine it wasn't a steak that you were getting. It would have been something, but you had the capacity to swallow. You had the capacity to obviously probably chew a little bit.
Well,
when you start getting your function back, where obviously, what's the next thing that starts happening?
So it wasn't first 2 months. I was on puree. So the muscle in my esophagus weren't strong enough to direct my food down into my stomach without directing into my lungs. And when you drink a water, you drink something too fast and you cough and went down the wrong way.
Yeah.
And that was what would have happened if I tried to eat anything, because my muscles could not couldn't for I don't think it was forcing it down. They just couldn't direct it down good enough. Anyway, so I was on the first stage I was on was puree, and that's like putting a steak in a blender, taking it out, mixing it around, putting it in a blender again, taking it out and feeding it to you through a straw. And then there was so once my muscles had gone on to the next, had grown, gotten strong, a little bit stronger, I then went on to puree, which was just like putting it in the blender just once and then being able to eat it. And then after that, the next stage was being able to eat food, generally like everyone else does. And that took about 2 months. And the way in which we get out of, we get past the time of post-traumatic amnesia is you need to be able to answer the same set of questions 3 days in a row. Simple questions like, your age, where you live, what the day is, what dates is Christmas, those sort of things. And those questions took me, because my cognitive dysfunction and my cognitive abilities took me it took me a long time to be able to answer 3 days in a row.
Do you remember those questions?
I don't remember the question. I think that might even be a set run of questions that they ask.
In terms of my apologies, do you remember being asked questions?
Oh, okay. No, I don't, because I don't remember being asked the questions.
Wow. So it's incredible, because it's almost like they're talking to you, but you're still not there. They're saying, Scott's not here, but Scott's brain is. Hey, Scott's brain, can you do these things for us? Because he's not ready yet. It's like we haven't booted up to meeting Scott yet.
We're not there yet.
I don't know. That's what it feels like to me. That's how I'm piecing it together in my head. It's like we haven't met Scott yet. Because wow.
Yeah, one of the questions, and I write about this in my book because it's such a family joke, and it's not even funny. Is that that one of the questions was when's Christmas, and I answered that by telling them the 15th of December, 1985, and I think that was the year I was born. And Mum taps me on the shoulder and she says, "Scott, that's great. Christmas is on the 25th of December. Well done. It's every year, not just the year that you were born." And I remember the feeling, because this happened on numerous different occasions, not just in PTA, but it's in numerous different occasions through my recovery. When she told me that, boom, I remember, oh, of course. Yeah, of course it's every year. How stupid am I? And a lot of things a lot of things that I've done and things that have happened, that has happened to me. I've had in my mind that this is this way, and then somebody tells me, actually, no, it's actually that way. And I think, oh, of course it is. Of course it is.
That's really interesting because it almost talks to, I'm certainly no memory expert by any means, but it talks to the difference between being able to do recall, which I think is very different to, oh gosh, it's dropped my memory now, but versus, association, where trying to recall it in its own right versus being prompted and then kind of knowing, and hence why multiple choice questions are much easier than just answering the damn question.
Definitely.
Because we can kind of scan it, and one of them helps us with our recall,
triggering it,
to trigger it. Triggers the memory. It's almost like, you kind of knew it, but you couldn't have access to it. And when someone did give you access to it, then it's kind of like, oh, I've got it now. I found the pathway back to that memory, back to that knowledge.
100%. I guess it's because of the two different parts of your brain that deal with your memory. You've got your long term, which I think is in the hippocampus. Correct me if I'm wrong. But deep inside the brain is where the long-term memory is, and that's where all that information is sitting. But because I have frontal lobe damage, and the frontal lobe is where your cognition sits and where your high executive functioning sits, which is where memory is, your working memory, your day-to-day short-term memory. That short-term memory, I guess, when I was in those situations, is what was giving my brain access to the deeper memory. So it had to sort of go through two doors. I had to go through a door to be able to get to that memory. And that door was in my frontal lobe, which had been damaged. And over time, that frontal lobe has recovered to a certain extent. I mean, it's still, I still suffer cognitive dysfunction. I still suffer the memory loss. But there are things that I use now to help me with that.
How did you go, in terms of your mental sort of state, waking up, and I don't know at what point this occurred for you where you recognize what's happened, that you're like, oh my God, I've been in a massive, accident. I've had a TBI. I'm no longer physically in the shape that I remember when I was at the Derby. What was that all like? Or is that a little bit further down, or it kind of starts to come back?
Well, that was okay. So when I had the accident and I woke up from the coma, and I obviously wasn't with it that well. I remember thinking to myself that I was not working, and thinking to myself that, knowing that it was summer at the time, and knowing that Christmas was coming up, I just imagined that I was off early. Sorry, off early. I was off work early, and I was going to have a longer break, which was, that was going to be cool. I didn't have to go to work, and then the new year came around, and I imagined that by the time New Year came around, because that was still still like a month and a half away. By the time New Year's comes around, I'll be back up on my feet. I'll be out of here. That's cool. When New Year's did come around, I was still in hospital, and not only was I still in hospital, I was still in post-traumatic amnesia. So I was still not allowed to see any friends. And then when I finally realized that I wasn't going back to work at the start of the year, I sort of imagine that, okay, well, this is massive. I'm not going to get to go back to work probably for another few months now. And then another few months came and went, and look, I was still in rehab. I was still in hospital at that time. I was in
So you
hospital
couldn't
for
even recognize how banged up you were. You, you,
no, not at
you
all.
like you obviously have a positive nature about you, and that seems to have gone with you. Like, oh yeah, not working too well, but month and a half, back, but in this kind of confused state that maintained, but in so many ways you had no recognition of how, because I've seen some of your videos of how banged up you were, that how limited, as you say, it's taking 5 years to be able to speak the way that you do, and everyone else takes that for granted, and you've had to relearn that and start again, hence your reference of like your newborn, they're learning everything again. There's huge processing required, and deliberate processing to try and move their hand, to move their arm, move their lips, make a sound. You didn't kind of fully recognize it. You could still think in your mind, but not kind of see the extent of your traumatic brain injury.
Yeah, well, it was, that was the first few months of my recovery. And then I realized, the first few months they came and went, and I was still in hospital, and I didn't get out of hospital until mid 2009. And then it wasn't until, mid 2010 that I realized how bad I actually was. And that was kind of when I went through depression. And that depression lasted, and that kind of, I wouldn't say it hit me like a ton of bricks, but it did. It was, my accident was so heavy on my shoulders up until, I'd been carrying this accident around with me on my shoulders for 2.5 years at this point. And it was just getting really, really, really heavy. And my job was, for the first 3 years post accident, I was in rehab. So I was at Epworth Hospital, Epworth Rehab here in Melbourne, and I was there for 3 years. And recovery was my full-time job. Everyone goes to work every week for 38 hours, and you spend a lot of your time thinking about work and a lot of your time at work. Well, my work was recovery. It was rehab. I was doing at the start, the first 6 months when I was in hospital, it was a rehab hospital. I was doing 25 hours of therapy a week, and which is like that just shows you how much of a full-time job it was. And then once I had left as an inpatient, I continued on there as an outpatient for the next 2.5 years. And I was doing it for 12 hours a week. So when I wasn't at rehab, I was at the gym. If I wasn't at the gym, I was down at the park trying to get my legs working. And if I wasn't at the park, I was in the pool trying to do my hydro. If I wasn't in the pool, I was probably at home doing my home exercises. If I wasn't doing my home exercises, I was at my hand therapy. If I wasn't at my hand therapy, I was probably somewhere doing exercises to try and help my cognition and help my brain, playing games and doing crosswords and doing word finds and those sort of things, those to try and help me with my cognition. So
and just for our listeners, so they're aware from it as well, because I haven't seen any of the videos. Scott was in a position where he had to learn how to completely walk again from scratch, and I've seen some of those videos and the very small progress and month by month, but how painstakingly difficult that is with aids, let alone to try and do it in in your own sort of balance and effort and deliberate movement of your limbs. You went from scratch again. Incredible feat of determination and as you say, a daily, maybe not even job. It's a grind. It's a struggle. I can't even imagine what's the right language without insulting you, because there is no language that describes it properly. I can't imagine what that's like.
I guess it's a job. You go to a job, you've got a choice. If you go to your physiotherapist, you've got a choice to go there. This was a necessity. If I was going to live a life, if I was going to recover to any degree, it was a necessity that I go to this rehab. It was a necessity that for the goals that I had set for myself, it was a necessity that I go down to the gym. It was a necessity that I go to my hand therapy. It was a necessity that I did all these things to help myself, because if I didn't do all these things, I would stay where I was in 2008, and that was not where I wanted to be.
Did you have any doubts?
Yeah. When depression set in, that doubts were. I was doubting a lot.
Before that, during your rehab?
Yeah, look, I guess no. I had such because my accident wasn't as bad as what I didn't think my accident was as bad as what it was. It was always I was just getting over that next hill, and then when I get over that next hill, I'm going to be fine. Everything's going to be, back to normal, back to where we were. But when you get over that hill, you've got another bigger hill to go. And then another and another. I guess it would be like, climbing. Okay, let's say it's like climbing up Mount Everest, right? You wouldn't be able to see the peak to where you're going every single moment of the journey. You might get glimpses of it throughout your journey, but every single moment of your journey, you're not looking at that peak and walking towards it. You're just looking at that next little peak, and you think that when you're over that peak, it'll be closer. But when you get over that peak, there's another peak, and then another, and another, and another. And I think that was kind of what it was like until I hit depression. And when I hit depression, was like when I got over that crest, that final, got over that hill that was meant to be the final hill, and then I can see where the peak is. And that peak is so far away that it looks like it's ungettable. And that was when the self-doubt, that was when it set in. And that was when I really started to doubt whether or not I was, whether or not I was strong enough to make it up there.
When that dawned on you that it was all too big, the peak was too far away, it was too high, was that because of your expectations? Was that a realization? Was it because you were tired? Is it a combination of the lot? Because you're getting stronger and stronger, more and more aware, How does that sort of play into why did it dawn on you in that moment, or what was going on for you at the time? Were you much stronger? Were you more physically capable at that time, that 3-year point?
Yeah, well, I guess because of my physical disabilities that I've got, one of the disabilities is my hand that doesn't work that well. And that's from severed nerves in my right arm. And so my arm doesn't work that well because of the lobe damage, or the damage that I did to my brain. I've got paralysis down the right side of my body. And so I'm not as physically able as I was prior to 2008 in my old life. And it was, I think it was about the time in 2010 that I guess, and it's hard to say this, that everyone kind of got over my accident. And I say that because when I had my accident, it was big news. It was massive from where I'm from, and in my circles, it was massive. And there was a lot of attention on Scott Harris. But then as time went on, everyone goes on with their lives. Everyone goes back to work. Everyone starts to do the things that they always did. And when life was back to normal, well, I guess it went probably back to normal pretty quick for everyone. But when I saw it going back to normal for everyone else, and I saw them moving on with their lives, a lot of, at the time I was 23 years of age, and my friends at the time were getting married. They were building their own houses with their own hands. They were going on holidays and going on holidays, traveling the world by themselves and doing all these things that they were meant to be doing at that time of their life. And I was still way back here. I was still way back. I was in rehab. I was getting hand fed. I was still, as you say, I was in the grind. I was still there, and they were here. And that was just that took a massive toll on my mental state. Yeah.
So when it dawned on you as to where you were, that you recognized that there was a significant disparity, and that people were just kind of, and not in a judgmental way, but they were just returning to their lives. In actual fact, they'd probably returned to their lives some time ago. But it dawned on you that, oh my goodness, this is the norm. That kind of knocked you about.
Yeah, and I think, look, of course, every if I was in that position, I'd move on with my life, of course, and it's so I don't hold anyone to.
Oh, no.
I hold nothing against no one for this. That's just the way life is. But at the time, it felt like, I'm here. Why is nobody waiting for me? Why is everyone moving on and leaving me here high and dry? And that was when it really, I guess, dawned on me that I was on this journey alone. And yeah, I had my family there with me every step of the way, but they weren't up here in my head. They were there supporting me. They were there picking me up when I was falling down, but they weren't with me in my head. And that was when I realized that this was a very, very solitary thing. And the only place I felt comfortable in life was at rehab. And with, like, it honestly felt like when I was at rehab, it felt like they were, I just felt that was just my place to be. They
were your family.
They were my family, and that felt like, because when I was at rehab, everyone was on the same level. We're all in rehab together. But when I was out in the real world, I was below everyone else. Whereas when I was at rehab, I was either above others or I was on the same level as other people. And that was where that was my happy place. And I formed some lifelong friendships from that, from the rehab, that I'm just so grateful that I was able to be there for the period of time that I was at.
It's incredible. How did you get through that darkest point, or that dark point?
That dark point, yes. I guess one of the biggest things that has helped me, and that's what I talk about in my presentations that I do as a speaker, was goal setting and setting goals. And in 2010, I got asked to go up to the snow with a group here in Victoria. They're also in New South Wales, called Disabled Winter Sports Australia. And I went up to the snow with them. I went up there with a fixed mindset that I was now in a box. I was now in that box with disability, with all the disabled people, and I wasn't able to do other things that able-bodied people were able to do. And I went away to the snow, and that weekend away kind of proved to me that I maybe all this disability stuff was, physically, but more so was in my head. It was up there, and it took something like that weekend away that I was able to realize that maybe I'm not as disabled as I think I am. And from that moment, I was then able to set a goal, and that was to go overseas, over to Canada. And that goal took me, setting that goal gave me a purpose, because prior to going up to the snow, I was going around in circles. That was all, my whole life was just going around in circles. Yeah, I was trying to get better, but why was I trying to get better? What was at the end of that tunnel? There might have been light there, but what was that light going to bring me? So I didn't know that. So I would say at the start of depression, I was lost. I was completely lost. And this goal that I had set to go over to Canada had given me a reason to get up every single day and put in 110% effort, because that was where I was going. I was heading towards that one goal.
Almost like you were back in rehab.
100%. But I guess I was in rehab at the time. But this goal gave me a focus. It gave me a purpose, and it gave me something to strive for. And even though I wasn't sure if I was going to be able to do this, but this was just one thing that I wanted to do. I wanted to go over to Canada. I wanted to snowboard over in Canada by myself, without anyone helping me. Because what
was that about? Was it to prove something to yourself, or why would, what's the purpose behind that? What sparked that flame inside you? What's it about?
So I guess when you're in a state like I was in, when you're getting literally hand fed, you aren't fending for yourself. Everybody is doing everything for you. And your independence, like a baby, is non-existent. And I found my independence was, in my head, was non-existent for many years. And that goal that I set was about not only proving to myself that I've got this, that I'm not that disabled kid, that I can do the things that all my friends do. It was about also regaining that independence and regaining that feeling of I can live my life on my own, and I don't need anyone to help me. I don't need anyone to do my shopping for me, cook my meals for me, make my bed for me. I can do all that. And a lot of the time, when I'm talking about making my bed and making my meals and stuff, a lot of the time through my recovery, I was doing that because I was proving that I could take care of myself, that I had that independence. And you'll find that a lot with brain injury, is that people's independence is taken away, and all they want is the independence back. All they want to do is be able to show people that they can do things on their own. And look, a lot of the time I probably couldn't have done things without the help and guidance of people. But that was just one thing that I was striving for. So that 2.5 years.
So much of that was about your identity, of reclaiming it, taking that back and saying, no, I'm back and I can do all these things for myself, and I've got proof, I've got evidence, watch me.
Yeah, 100%. And look, could I do those things that I wanted to do? Not all of them. But I was gonna stop until I proved myself wrong. I wasn't gonna stop. And look, more often than not, I feel that I'm a relatively smart guy. I know what I'm capable of. It is the other people that you have in the world that underestimate your capabilities. And when others underestimate your capabilities, that is what fuels the fire to succeed.
To prove them wrong, to say, maybe not that, but it fueled your fire to say, I can do this. I'm not going to be limited. How long did it take you to get to I'm assuming you got to Canada. You did it?
I did. And that was what I wrote in my book. That's what half of my book is about a trip overseas. And that took me 2.5 years to get there. And when I finally got there, I walked out of Australia with people behind me highly doubting my ability to be able to take care of myself in another country on the other side of the world, 13,000 kilometers away from home, on my own. And I ended up going to Canada, and I then went on to 27 other countries around the world. And I returned 18 months later, and I went traveling around the world for 18 months, solo, with more problems than I'd had hot dinners. And and that was what returning home was what really showed me that there is nothing in this world that I can't do.
That's incredible. That's incredible. And that's what a large part of your book, Crashing into Potential, is about.
Yep, that is. So that's half of the book, and the other half is, I guess, working towards that goal. But I hadn't realized that goal until a couple of years into it. But the whole of the second half was when I left Australia and when I returned, and I talk about my dad's emails that he wrote, which really, it helped me so much when I wrote my book. I sat down one weekend when I first started writing it. I sat down and I read through the emails, and I smashed out about 10,000 words, put it down on paper, and I then stopped writing then, and I picked it up actually a couple of years later. But having those email addresses, having those emails really was just, it was so beneficial. Actually, I'm going to go back and say, because I wrote the book after I had been away. So I'd read the emails after I had been away, but something in me said that if I can manage to do this and get around the world by myself, maybe I can write a book about it. And so I went away. When I went away, I wrote down what happened every single day. I say every single day. It was maybe I didn't write exactly a paragraph, a whole massive paragraph every day, but at least I wrote something down each day to trigger my memory of what happened. So I come home.
Is that because you needed to, as part of, because your brain still wasn't doing what you wanted to do, the short term memory to make sure you've captured it, that you don't?
Yeah.
Is that part of that, or?
I think that it was. I wanted to be able to remember it as well. Because of my memory, if I didn't have my notes or my journal, if I didn't have that, I would have forgotten a lot of the biggest part of my life, and I wanted to be able to remember it. Yeah, remember it. So I wrote them, and then that is coming so handy. It was about 37 A4 pages of notes from each day that I'd written, each note that I'd written in my journal.
And what were some of the takeaways that this trip highlighted or uncovered for you?
Was that I'm capable. You know, I'm not in that box. That I am just like, it was when landing the plane after my trip was over and walking out of the terminal, it felt like I was a completely different person that had completely different person to who had left Australia. I had left, and every single one of my problems that I had related to my depression, related to my accident, related to my abilities and mindset. Every single one of those downfalls had stayed in Australia when I left. So when I came home, they were not there anymore. And I came home a completely different person. And I'm so grateful that I was able to do that.
Did your friends and family recognize this, Scott 2.0, so to speak? Did they realize? Because obviously the outside continues to look the same. Did they see this transformational shift that was going on the inside?
Yeah, I guess they did. Yeah.
And I suppose, in what
short,
ways? In what ways was it different?
In short, yes, they did. And things that, that I've spent 18 months away on my own, showing that I've got my own independence. So when I've gotten back, they automatically just gave me my independence back. So that was, they let me have it, I guess. You've won this one, here you go. So
maybe you took it when you left.
Exactly. Yeah, I did. Yeah, that's it. I'm taking my independence with me. I'm going around the world. That was kind of, I guess that was exactly what it was like.
What an incredible story. And I know that now you, and obviously there's a big gap that we probably can't cover right now, but I know that now you do work in terms of helping others or guiding others, see some of the things that you've seen, the learnings, the limitation, to break through some of those limitations that they hold on themselves. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah. Okay. So in about, I got back from overseas, and I started doing some property development, and that came and went, and I didn't continue on doing that. And then I was a bit lost on what I was actually, I found myself in the same position that I found myself in 10 years prior. So that was in, back when I was 21.
23.
Sorry, it was a decade later. I was lost, and I didn't know where I was going. And one of the goals that I had back when I was in rehab in 2011 was to speak to high school students. I wanted to share my journey with people and show them, what happens when things go wrong. And I had spoken to a number of schools back then, but when I left Australia, that I stopped doing that and that work because that was never going to be my career. I just did that because that was a goal that I had in rehab. So with my speech pathologist and occupational therapist, one of my goals was to be able to present to people. So I did my first presentation in front of my occupational therapist, and then the second one in front of my occupational therapist and my speech pathologist. My third presentation was in front of 3 people. Fourth was in front of a whole room of people. The fifth was in front of the whole hospital, and everyone wanted to come and see me. So I kept doing that each week, which was great because that gave me good confidence. And then I went out and I presented to schools, and I got home from fast forward now to getting home from overseas, and that was not going to be my career. I didn't know what my career was going to be, and when I really thought about what am I going to do with my life, I then thought to myself, I really actually enjoyed the presenting that I did at the schools. Maybe I'll continue on doing that. So then I started to take it more seriously, and I actually now, fast forward now, like 5 years, fast forward from there, and now this is my, I know it seems cliche to say, but this was why I was put on earth, why I had my accident, was to be able to inspire people now to be able to achieve things that they don't think they can achieve. So that was, that's what I'm doing now. I'm presenting to schools, and I'm presenting to sporting clubs, presenting to corporate clients, and that's my job as an inspirational speaker.
And how can people get in contact to hear about your story, or discuss with you about working together, wherever they're coming from, because I could talk to you for hours and hours and hours to learn more about your journey and your mindset and going through each part of your life, and even your current. Where can people find out more
information? On my website. So I have a website, www.scottbharris.com.au, and on that website, that's where I've got all my information about my speaking. And I also have a podcast called Crashing into Potential. So in that the reason for the podcast was because I had a school. Not a school. I have a program in schools that's teaching the resilience aspect of my book and of my journey. It's a literacy program, and a lot of schools were actually reading out to the students in class. So I thought I'd go about reading my book out to the students through my podcast. So I've done that. So I've read every chapter of my book in my podcast. And the good thing about the podcast is that it's kind of like a 3-dimensional book, because I'll be reading the book and then I'll go out of the book and I'll talk about things that I remember, things that pop up in my head, especially when I went around traveling the world. There was a lot that got taken out of the book, got taken out of my book because of pages. There was going to be too many pages. And so a lot of the things that I remember, I will say, I will just go out of the book quickly and I'll talk about that, and then I'll go back to the book and continue reading. And that really gives it a personal feeling, personal aspect to an audio book, which is pretty cool.
Have you thought about creating a Audible book? Because I know there are other authors that have done a similar thing. Specifically David Goggins, who goes through a chapter and then there's a conversation about that chapter, and I found it to have much more depth. To hear more of the backstory rather than just the reading of the book. I'm wondering if you've thought of creating an Audible book, because that would be, pretty cool.
That's my next idea. Thank you.
You're not busy enough.
So
there's a couple of months' work.
Who do I give the commission to?
Oh, yeah, we can go to neshnikolic.com.
Yeah, so
it would be
I
fantastic to hear your voice and that depth around that maybe packages your podcast into one, because I think it's extraordinary story, a lot to contemplate and learn for, and for all of us to think about, because something that's certainly shown up for me in talking to you today is all those things that I take for granted. The fact that I can speak without thinking, the fact that I feed myself without any thought whatsoever. All these, just anything.
The fact that you can tie your own shoelaces quite simply without even thinking about it.
Well, what's interesting there is, while we were speaking, I felt my shoes on my feet as being uncomfortable, and I contemplated, do I kick them off, and the hassle of tying them back on, right? And so it's fascinating just you're even raising that, because I'm not even thinking about that, and there's this kind of laziness that shows up, and disregard for, I can just tie them up, yet I'm too lazy to kick it off, so I don't have to tie them up later. It's fascinating how egocentric we become, and to hear a different perspective and story just is lovely to hear, and I thank you again as well for your candid and open and vulnerable nature to discuss this today.
Yeah, thanks for having me here. It's been brilliant to be able to share my story with your audience. Yeah, thanks.
I think everyone grab yourself a copy of Crashing into Potential by Scott Harris, and get that on scottbharris.com.au. Much appreciated again, Scott, and I wish we just had more time, because we could talk for hours, but keep up the great work, and I don't think you have to try and be an inspiration, because you already are. Your story stands for itself. It's just getting this message out there, and I think we all need to be reminded by people like yourself. So thank you for your time today.
Thanks, Nesh.
If you enjoyed this podcast, please support it by going to iTunes and putting a review, subscribe, share it via social media, and tell others about it. Start a conversation. It's listeners like you that make this able and possible, and why we bring in these guests to go out and share their knowledge and resources. And just lastly, if you are a psychologist and you want to go out and be part of a bigger team, develop your experience, and get into some exciting work, come to strategicpsychology.com.au/careers and reach out. I'd love to hear from you.